Well, things are already starting to get a little messy outside, so if you have not made your way home from work, you may want to think about doing so here. As we go throughout the evening hours, we'll be seeing a lot of that slush that we have on the main roadways starting to freeze over again, and that's going to lead to more slick spots throughout the evening. So let's take a look at these winter weather alerts here for you. Again, everyone in the TV6 viewing area under one of the two alerts. We've got the area from Dubuque over towards Galena around the Highway 20 corridor under that winter weather advisory, and then we have the ice storm warning that's in effect for the rest of the TV6 viewing area. So let's talk about this, because I've had a couple of questions of folks asking, well, with it being so cold, especially earlier today, why are we seeing the potential of rain, which is falling and freezing on contact, so we call that freezing rain, as opposed to snow? Well, here's basically the idea. When we say that we have like warmer air that we're tracking that's moving into the area, it's not always at the surface. And in fact, in this case, what's happening is at the surface, our temperature is below freezing. But as you head just off the surface about 5,000 feet and then you go farther up into the atmosphere, temperatures are well above freezing. So what's happening is all the snow that's falling from the clouds is falling into that warmer air mass and melting into a liquid. And it stays a liquid all the way down till it gets close to the surface. And that's when we get freezing rain, which is pretty much more common and widespread right now. And at times, we're seeing some sleet as we get a little bit of colder air sneaking back into that warm column. But notice we're not seeing any snow, and that's the reason why. To get snow, you want the temperature to be below freezing all the way from the clouds all the way to the surface. And that's what we've had over our past several storms. But in this case, this is why we're dealing with an icy situation, because we've got a layer of warm air that's sitting just off of the surface all the way up halfway through the atmosphere, and that's melting all the snow and turning it into a liquid. Now, here's the temperature at the surface, again, at or below freezing. So as that liquid falls and hits the surface and freezes on contact, because temperatures are below freezing at the surface, and that's what's creating the icy conditions. And that's why freezing rain is the most dangerous precipitation you can see in terms of specifically winter precipitation, because not only does it coat the surfaces like the sidewalks and the roadways and create slick conditions, but also it can have a tendency to coat to some of the tree limbs and power lines. And if you have weakened tree limbs or weakened trees in general, sometimes they tumble over, and they tumble over on the power lines, and that's why you get power outages. Thankfully, we don't expect a ton of ice in terms enough to really cause widespread power outages with this system, but there could be some slick conditions and also some isolated tree and power limbs coming down. So we'll be watching that for you throughout the evening. Here's a look at the current radar. Again, we've had several bursts of what we would call some thunder sleet, some thunder freezing rain moving on through the area. In fact, you can see here right now we've got some pretty good activity taking place between Buffalo over towards Sterling. This is heading up 88. And again, notice at times we're seeing some lightning strikes within that. And then look off towards the south and west. We've got more activity beginning to develop and stream in. So that means that we're going to continue with this at least throughout the evening hours before it slowly begins to come to an end. So here's the setup of while we're seeing this. We've got a frontal boundary that's stalled to just to our south, an area of low pressure riding along that front. So the low pressure is pulling up that warm and moist air mass right up into this cold air mass we have at the surface. So as warm air moves in, of course, warm air rises, just like in the summertime when you have to turn on the AC in the house. You know, usually the upstairs is warmer than the downstairs. And that's because of the fact that you've got that warm air moving in aloft. And so what's happening is that precipitation falls through that and melts and creates the icy condition. So that's what we're going to be seeing as we go throughout the evening hours. Notice at 8 o'clock, we're still seeing some of that activity redeveloping across the area, even through about 10 or 11 o'clock. And then slowly this should begin to taper off after midnight. And I think by tomorrow morning, we're done with the precipitation falling from the sky, but we'll still have some icy conditions to be concerned with. Again, most of us picking up at least a tenth to a quarter of an inch of ice, but some of us have already picked up a tenth of an inch of ice, and that means we could see a quarter of an inch or slightly more in some spots. And that's going to lead to a layer of ice that's going to create itself on some of the roadway surfaces as well. So if you're traveling this evening, you need to be aware. Sometimes it's hard to see that until you run right across it, and then you go slipping and sliding. And that's going to be a primary concern. So be careful on your drive home this evening. Travel impacts, we're going to have high impacts with this system moving through, along with the potential of some school delays by tomorrow morning, because some of that ice may still be out there. So this gets out of here tomorrow morning. Our next system moves in Wednesday night and a Thursday, so we don't get much of a break. That looks to be more of a rain system switching over to a wintry mix during the day on Thursday as more colder air moves on into the area. So 38 tomorrow afternoon, but until that time, we'll have a little icy concern for us tomorrow morning. And then as we get into your Thursday, we'll have that rain switching over to a wintry mix as temperatures start to drop from 40 in the afternoon to 6 degrees by Friday morning. But at least Friday into Saturday right now, looking with some sunshine.